those moments when everything slows down, when the noise of the world seems to fade into the distance and there's just enough space left for you to hear your own thoughts clearly, Sagittarius tends to reveal something unmistakably unique. Not the loud energy of someone trying to lead the room, not the posture of someone trying to prove a point, but a kind of honesty, so direct, so unfiltered, that it makes people pause. Sagittarius doesn't live comfortably in roles that don't belong to them. You can adapt, you can be flexible, but if you have to pretend for too long, your heart will start to speak up. There's something inside you that keeps nudging you closer to your own truth. When you believe in something, you say it. When you no longer resonate, you slowly step away, not to rebel, not to create conflict, but to protect your spirit from wearing thin. In a world where so many people adjust themselves just to be accepted, your natural presence feels like fresh air. You don't try to impress with elaborate words. You don't carefully construct an image just to fit in. You choose something simpler, to say what you think in the most respectful way you can. For some, that can feel uncomfortable. But for those who are tired of pretense, your honesty feels like a deep breath. Your sincerity isn't only directed outward, it's an ongoing conversation with yourself. You ask questions others might avoid. Am I living according to my values? Am I chasing someone else's expectations while ignoring my own inner voice? Those questions create your depth. You're not satisfied with shallow answers. You want to understand why you chose this road, why you believe what you believe, and sometimes that makes you different. Maybe you've been called too blunt, too idealistic, too independent, but deep down, you know something important. If you lose honesty with yourself, every other success starts to feel hollow. And that quiet integrity, that steady alignment within, people see it, even if they never say it out loud. In relationships, Sagittarius carries a certain clarity. You don't promise what you can't sustain. You don't try to become a perfect version of yourself just to be loved. You show up as you are, even the unfinished parts. Yes, that can make you more vulnerable, but it also creates connections that are real. Because when you give yourself permission to be authentic, you silently give others permission to do the same. Freedom for you isn't always about distance or dramatic change. Sometimes it's simply the right to say no when something no longer feels aligned. It's walking away from environments that shrink your spirit. It's admitting you've changed and that you no longer believe what you once did. That kind of freedom is internal, and that's what gives you your light. Of course, holding on to that honesty hasn't always been easy. There were moments when you realized truth must be carried gently. You've learned to speak what's real without cutting too deeply. You've learned that sincerity doesn't have to be sharp. With experience, your honesty has become warmer, more grounded, but it hasn't lost its core. Maybe what makes Sagittarius so valuable isn't how different you are, but the fact that you dare to stay true to yourself in a world that pressures everyone to be the same. You remind people that there is another way to live, a way that doesn't require endless layers of armor, a way where someone can be strong and still be genuine, free and still kind. If you've ever felt like you didn't quite fit into familiar molds, maybe that isn't a flaw. Maybe it's simply a sign that you're moving to your own rhythm. And maybe, without even knowing it, that quiet consistency within you is inspiring someone else in ways they've never spoken aloud. As this reflection continues somewhere inside your own thoughts, you might begin to wonder what part of that honesty you want to hold on to more tightly, how you can nurture it so it remains both free and gentle. Because the Sagittarius journey rarely stands still. It keeps opening new skies, new inner horizons, where you're invited again and again to discover yourself in the most authentic way possible. And once you've touched that honesty within yourself, Sagittarius rarely goes back to living for the approval of the crowd. There's an invisible thread inside you, always pulling toward a wider horizon, toward unanswered questions waiting to be explored. You don't settle easily for boundaries that were drawn for you, not because you're rebellious, but because your spirit needs room to breathe. Your sense of freedom isn't loud, It doesn't always show up as dramatic exits or bold declarations. Sometimes it's quiet. It's choosing not to let someone else decide for you. It's pausing before you say yes to something that doesn't feel aligned. It's allowing yourself to change direction when you know you've learned what you came to learn. Some people build a life inside the safety of what's familiar, stable, predictable, low risk. And there's nothing wrong with that. But for Sagittarius, stability without growth can start to feel suffocating. You need to feel expansion. You need to feel that you're learning, stretching, touching new perspectives. When life becomes too repetitive, you begin to hear a quiet voice inside, a whisper that says, "This isn't the end of the road." Freedom for you isn't only about geography. It's freedom of thought. You question instead of accepting something just because it's been around for years. You're curious about how others live, what they believe, how they choose. With every conversation, every experience, it's as if another door opens in your mind. That openness can make you hard to define because you refuse to confine yourself to a fixed identity. Some people see a lightness in you that they quietly wish they had. They've imagined trying something new, turning down a different road, living in alignment with what their heart truly wants. But fear holds them back. Fear of risk, fear of judgment, fear of losing what feels safe. And you, Sagittarius, even with your own doubts, often choose to move when you sense it's time, not always certain, but trusting your ability to adapt. What's beautiful is that your freedom doesn't isolate you. It inspires. When others watch you try something different, learn something unfamiliar, speak your own perspective, they begin to wonder if they could do the same. You don't need to convince anyone. You simply live your truth. And that quiet authenticity creates a ripple effect. Of course, freedom carries responsibility. You understand that every choice has consequences, so as you've grown, your independence no longer feels impulsive. It feels intentional, courage paired with reflection. You listen to your intuition, but you also listen to reality. You know that expanding your horizon doesn't mean rejecting what you've built. It means adding new layers of meaning to the life you already have. Maybe there were times you wondered why you couldn't just settle like others seem to. Why you keep searching even when things are good enough. Maybe that's simply how your soul is wired, a soul that needs movement to feel alive, a soul that senses life is bigger than what's visible right now, and if someone once called you unpredictable, too different, too hard to define, maybe they were only glimpsing a kind of freedom they haven't yet allowed themselves to touch. Because Sagittarius independence isn't about separating from the world. It's about entering the world fully, honestly, on your own terms. As this reflection continues inside your own thoughts, you might begin to ask yourself what you're longing to expand in this season of your life. Not to prove anything, not to impress anyone, but to nourish your spirit, because the Sagittarius path seems to gently invite you again and again to take one more step, not rushed, not forced, but meaningful. And once that spirit of freedom becomes a natural part of how you live, Sagittarius doesn't just want to keep moving, you want to understand where you're going. You're not only searching for new experiences, you're searching for the meaning beneath them. Not just expanding your outer world, but expanding your inner horizon. There's something in you that's always drawn to the bigger picture. When something happens, you rarely stop at the surface. You ask yourself, why did this show up in my life? What is it teaching me? What belief inside me is it reflecting? While others may get lost handling scattered details, you instinctively step back, take in the whole landscape, and connect the dots. That perspective isn't always easy to explain. Sometimes it's just a quiet intuition, a subtle sense that life is operating on a deeper logic than what's immediately visible. You can sit for hours thinking about what sounds like a simple question. What is real happiness when no one is watching? What does success mean if there's no applause? Is freedom complete if fear still lingers inside? Those questions don't exhaust you. They make you feel alive. Sagittarius philosophy isn't abstract or detached. It's woven into lived experience. into falling and rising, into traveling and returning, into conversations that linger long after they end. You learn from a journey, from a random exchange with a stranger, from a failure that once shook your confidence. Each experience becomes a piece of a larger mosaic you're slowly shaping, and you understand something essential, that the picture will continue to change as you change. In conversations, you often bring a wider lens. When someone sees only the immediate problem, you gently suggest another possibility, not to prove yourself right, but to open a window. And even if they never say it, people feel that expansiveness in you. They sense that you're not completely consumed by small conflicts or temporary chaos, because you're looking further ahead. Seeing the whole picture also softens the way you treat yourself. When a plan falls apart, you may feel disappointment, but you don't stay there long. You remind yourself this is one chapter in a longer story, one curve in a much wider road, and that mindset creates a quiet resilience inside you, even when everything outside is shifting. Some may have called you idealistic, too dreamy, too philosophical, but perhaps you simply believe life holds more depth than what the eye can immediately see. You believe every person is walking through lessons of their own, and that no experience is completely meaningless. That belief doesn't deny pain. It searches for the small light within it. And because your vision is wide, you're not easily confined by social labels. You understand people evolve. Circumstances shift. You may stand in one place today and somewhere entirely different tomorrow. What matters isn't preserving a fixed image, but continuing to grow with your expanding understanding. There are people who quietly admire the way you see life. They may never articulate it, but they feel expanded around you. They start asking deeper questions. They begin to realize life isn't only about completing tasks. It's about searching for meaning. And maybe some conversation with you planted that seed. As you continue walking forward with both freedom and perspective, you may find yourself standing before new horizons, not only in distance, but in awareness. And somewhere in this unfolding reflection, you might begin to wonder what else you're ready to expand in the way you see the world, because it seems that every time you understand one layer more deeply, another quiet door opens ahead. And when your vision has expanded far enough to see beyond what's happening right in front of you, something else begins to quietly define the way Sagittarius moves through life. It's a kind of optimism, not loud, not performative, but warm enough for others to feel. You're not someone who denies difficulty. You've known disappointment. You've walked through uncertainty. You've faced questions that didn't have immediate answers. And yet, through all of it, there's still a part of you that holds on to the possibility that something else lies ahead. That one closed door doesn't mean every path has disappeared. That belief isn't naive. It's more like a small light inside you, not blinding, but steady. Sagittarius often sees opportunity where others see only limits. When a plan falls apart, you may feel the sadness, but you also begin to ask, what might this be making room for? When a relationship shifts, you may feel the loss, but you remind yourself that everyone who enters your life brings a lesson. That perspective keeps you from staying too long in the shadow of disappointment. Your positive energy doesn't always show up as a bright smile. Sometimes it's a quiet sentence spoken at the right moment, a gentle reminder that someone still has options. It's the way you trust your own ability to rise again, and in doing so, you unknowingly give others a little more hope. Some people live defensively, always bracing for the worst so they won't be hurt. You understand that instinct. You've felt fear too, but you seem to choose a different posture. You accept that life may not unfold exactly as planned, and still, you keep walking forward with your heart open. You don't let fear write the entire story of your future. Optimism for Sagittarius isn't believing everything will be perfect. It's believing that something can be learned from every experience. That no matter how circumstances change, you can adapt, you can grow, you can find meaning. And that belief keeps you from being completely pulled into the negative currents around you. There's something else that happens too. When you carry that inner light, people tend to breathe easier around you. They may come to you exhausted and leave feeling slightly lighter, not because you solved their problems, but because you reminded them their story doesn't end on this page. That there are still chapters waiting to be written, of course. There are times you need rest, times when your own faith feels tested, but because you built that belief from within, it's not easily extinguished. You may slow down, you may question yourself, and somehow you find a small spark again. Maybe that's what makes your optimism quietly inspiring. It doesn't demand that others be cheerful. It doesn't deny sadness. It simply shows, without announcing it, that there is a way to move through hardship without losing trust in life itself. And in a world that can lean so easily toward pessimism, your presence becomes a reminder that hope doesn't have to be loud to be powerful. As you keep looking forward with that open gaze, you might begin to notice that your belief isn't only guiding you through your own turns, it's lighting the path for others gently. And somewhere in this flowing reflection, you may start to ask yourself how you want to nurture that energy so it stays honest with your emotions, while still protecting that quiet flame of hope for the roads ahead. And when that belief has truly become part of the way you move forward, another quality in Sagittarius begins to stand out over time. It's courage, but not the loud kind. Not the kind that challenges the world just to be seen. It's the ability to sit with what's uncomfortable and not turn away. You understand that optimism isn't the same as avoidance. In fact, because you believe life still holds possibility ahead, you're calm enough to look directly at what isn't perfect right now. When a relationship fractures, you don't rush to place all the blame outside yourself. You ask, what was my part in this? When a plan doesn't succeed, you don't only fault the circumstances. Well, you quietly review your choices, make adjustments, and keep going. The truth isn't always gentle. Sometimes it touches the parts of you that feel small, unfinished, not enough. But instead of covering it with justification, Sagittarius often chooses acknowledgement, not to shame yourself, but to grow, because you know if you never look at the issue clearly, you'll just keep circling around it. In important conversations, you tend to say what needs to be said, even if it creates a heavy pause. You don't like misunderstandings that linger just because someone is afraid of discomfort. You believe clarity, even when it stings at first, creates a stronger foundation over time, and that makes people both respect you and feel slightly cautious around your honesty. Maybe someone once said, you're too direct, too uncompromising, but inside, you know you're not trying to wound anyone. You're seeking truth as a form of release. You believe that when things are placed honestly on the table, there's a chance to understand each other more deeply. And even if the outcome isn't ideal, at least you're not left with the weight of having avoided what mattered. For Sagittarius, courage also means admitting when you've changed. There were beliefs that once felt certain, but over time you realized you no longer resonate with them. Instead of clinging to them just to maintain a consistent image, you allow yourself to evolve. That takes a different kind of bravery, the kind that refuses to be trapped by an old version of yourself. Truth also shows up in the moments you face your deepest fears. Fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of being misunderstood. You don't pretend those fears don't exist. You name them. And somehow, once named, they lose some of their power. Little by little, you build a quiet inner strength that isn't dependent on how others see you. Maybe that's why your presence sometimes makes people uneasy, not because you judge them, but because you gently remind them of what they're avoiding. When you speak a truth, it doesn't stop with your story. It reflects something back to them. And not everyone is ready to look into that mirror. Over time, though, your courage becomes softer. You learn timing. You learn to hold truth inside compassion. You understand not every right thing needs to be said immediately. And not everyone is walking at the same pace of growth. That maturity doesn't weaken your honesty. It deepens it. As you continue moving forward with belief, with vision, with the courage to face what's real, you may begin to notice that every time you look directly at something uncomfortable, you release yourself from an invisible weight. And somewhere within this unfolding reflection, You might quietly ask yourself what else is waiting to be seen more honestly, so the road ahead feels lighter, clearer, in your own unmistakable way. And after all the moments of facing truth, after the big questions about meaning, after the bold steps taken in freedom, there's something else about Sagittarius that quietly remains. It's the ability to live fully in the moment that's unfolding right now. You can think about the future. You can map out distant directions, but you rarely sacrifice the present entirely just to rush ahead. When you're in a conversation, you truly listen. When you step into a new place, you observe with genuine curiosity. When you feel something, you allow yourself to feel it instead of immediately jumping to the next thing. There's something in you that understands life isn't just a checklist of goals. It's a collection of small experiences, brief moments that quietly touch the heart. You can sit a little longer just to enjoy a peaceful afternoon. You can laugh freely without overthinking what tomorrow might bring. And that presence, that grounded awareness, makes you feel alive. Many people live in waiting mode. They wait until they achieve something before allowing themselves to be happy. They wait until everything is perfect before they exhale. But Sagittarius doesn't place life on hold like that. You understand each stretch of the road has its own value. That the journey isn't just a vehicle to the destination. It is part of the meaning itself. Living fully in the present also helps you learn faster from what's happening. When you stumble, you don't only look at the outcome. You absorb the lesson inside the process. When you succeed, you don't focus only on the achievement, you remember the effort that carried you there. That attentiveness shapes your growth, naturally, without forcing, without rushing. When people are around you, they feel your presence. You're not just physically there, you're there with your mind, with your heart. And in a world where attention is constantly pulled toward phones, toward plans, toward what's next, full presence becomes rare, almost sacred. Living in the present doesn't mean you've abandoned the future. You still dream, you still have direction, but you don't let tomorrow's worries steal today's experience. You trust that each moment unfolding is shaping who you're becoming. And because of that, you choose to participate in life instead of standing outside watching it pass. Maybe that's why people feel gently reminded when they're near you, reminded that they can slow down, that they can breathe deeper, that they don't have to control everything in order to enjoy something. You don't teach this as a lesson, you simply live it. And that aliveness becomes its own message. These qualities may not always be spoken aloud as praise. Not everyone has the awareness to say they admire your inner freedom, your wide perspective, your courage, but they feel it. They feel lighter around you. They feel the quiet invitation to live a little more honestly, a little more openly. Sagittarius, in your natural way, represents a way of living that isn't ruled by fear or rigid expectation. You show that someone can reflect deeply and still enjoy the moment, face truth, and still hold faith. And sometimes, that combination causes others to reconsider how they are moving through their own lives. As this reflection continues somewhere inside you, you might begin to ask where, today, you want to live more fully. What you want to truly notice right in front of you. Because maybe, in this very moment, you are already touching the meaning you once searched for everywhere else.